Welcome to Talent Strategy 60. I am your friendly neighborhood talent strategy nerd, Dr. Jim. And just an FYI for those tuning in to the stream, Brian Keenan, the founder of Odyssey, who joins us today, is a big fan of the the intro music. We will be getting ready to launch into the show. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with some of our panelists, so we'll bring them in as those resolve. But I'm super excited to have this conversation today. It is the season finale of Talent Strategy 60. This is the last live show that we will have for this year, and then the new season launches in January of next year. I can't believe it's already the end of the year, so it's going to be pretty action packed in terms of what we're going to get into. So for those of you who are new to the show, this is an interactive conversation. So feel free to join us in the stream. We are streaming both on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. If the LinkedIn stream goes down, I included the YouTube link that you can hop into and catch the stream over there. This is designed to be an interactive conversation, so feel free to drop your comments and questions into the chat. We will be incorporating them into the conversation with our great panelists, and we're right now in missing panelist formation, and we'll fix that shortly as we dive into the conversation. So for those unfamiliar with the topic or the show, the mission of our show is to empower talent leaders to do more with less by leveraging collective intelligence. And that's the mission of the panelists that we have joined, that we've gathered here today, is to help solve those talent challenges that everyone is facing. So first up, I want to introduce the panel. Sierra, I want you to lead off and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you're up to.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm so glad to be here with you guys this afternoon. I am Director of National Partnerships for Excelsior Staffing, and we are a national staffing brand. So recruiting, staffing in all different types of industries is what we are used to. So I'm excited about today's discussion.
Awesome stuff, Sierra. Thanks for sharing that, and we're looking forward to your insights into the conversation, especially from a staffing and recruiting lens. Next up, I want to introduce one of the other panelists, Adam. Thanks for joining us. You're a veteran of the Cascading Leadership Podcast, so welcome back, and thanks for sharing your time. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you very much for having me. I am in Glasgow, Scotland. It's pretty dark where I am, as you can probably see. Hopefully you can see me okay. I've been in recruitment for 23 years, since 1999. I started in staffing. I was there for 3 years. I then moved into recruitment marketing, into consulting at PwC, and then started my own business, which was a recruitment sourcing company called Social Media Search. That joined forces with a London-listed search firm in 2012, and I was there for 4 years as a divisional managing director before starting Candidate ID, which is a recruitment marketing automation technology product, which we started working on in 2016, really launched to the market in 2017, and sold to iCIMS, which is the world's largest talent acquisition tech company, in March this year. So I'm spending a lot of time talking to people in America, and I'm really pleased to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Always happy to have you on there, Adam. Next up, Justin, thanks for joining us, and tell the listeners and viewers on the stream a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing at Compt.
Absolutely. My name is Justin Schmidt. I'm the VP of Marketing at Compt, which is a lifestyle spending account and perk and benefit management platform. I've been in marketing my entire career, and specifically at startups. So I've been blessed to have the opportunity to design a lot of roles, build a lot of teams, hire a lot of people, and really honored to be able to share some of the insights along that journey with the panel and the audience today. And super excited for the conversation.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks for joining us, Justin. Last but certainly not least, we have our final panelist, our last panelist, Brian. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Tell the audience a little bit about you and the work that you're doing.
Hi, thanks for having me. Brian Keenan, founder of Odyssey. Quick background, I was a first-gen college student trying to break into finance when I first encountered the network gap, how important access, connections, and networking were for landing that dream career role, and really became passionate about the issue. Left the world of finance, went to business school to start building Odyssey. We ran a bunch of pilots, and we've been live on Odyssey for the last 3 years, where we're opening up conversations between companies, employees, and the outside world of underrepresented candidates. Think about it like a easy way to spin up a new DEI initiative with coffee chats, one-to-ones, where you're building your pipeline and providing that equitable access so you can hire the best talent regardless of their background.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I think I think with the intros that each of you provided, for those who are familiar with kind of my presence on LinkedIn, you have a clear idea of why I'm so excited about this conversation, because you have four folks who are deeply involved in the various aspects of talent strategy, and this particular conversation features three people who are deeply involved in talent tech, and they actually have experience at various stages of that tech life cycle. And with Sierra bringing in the people strategy lens into the conversation, we're set up for a really robust conversation about a particularly relevant topic, and that has to do with how do you build a sustainable hiring process that is relevant for high growth organizations. And the reason why we started building this panel together and decided to advance this conversation is because everybody's seen sort of the more recent trends, and this isn't the first time we've seen that type of trend over the last several years. And from a people strategy perspective or trend perspective, we've seen this. We've seen, in good times, everybody hires over the moon and just, there's a huge demand for talent. And the minute some sort of uncertainty happens in the economy, you see mass layoffs happening left, right, and center all over the place. And the question that I posed to the panelists when we were thinking about, getting this band together was there's got to be a better way to approach your people strategy than this binge and purge culture that we apparently seem to be in, where it kind of gets across for the average employee that you're just a cog in the wheel, you're a means to an end, and when the situation warrants, you're disposable. And maybe I'm a bit of an idealist in terms of thinking there's got to be a better way, but the intent of this conversation is to help map out a better path by bringing together some pretty heavy hitting leaders in the talent and technology space to map out how things can be done differently. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I've laid out the landscape a little bit, and I want to yield the floor a little bit and have the panelists get their reaction or offer their reactions or observations onto the environment. So first up, Brian, the situation that I just mapped out and the reality that I just mapped out, how does that resonate with what you've seen as an early stage startup founder? And how has that shaped sort of your go forward as you're building your organization?
Yeah, thanks for passing that question. Basically, one of the frameworks I think a lot about for not just this decision, not just for hiring, but for any of the decisions we're making, is looking at one-way doors versus two-way doors. And that's two-way door, really easy to make the decision, reverse it, do something else. One-way door, it's a lot harder to reverse that decision. I think, to me, a mistake that can happen a lot is viewing hiring as a two-way door, right? We know, we can just, if our budget, if our revenue changes, et cetera, it's really easy to just reverse and let go of all these people. But I think really understanding at a deep level that there is a lot of consequences there, emotional, the relationships that you're building can be a big, you're investing a lot, right, in having these people as part of your team. So viewing full-time hiring in that context as more of a one-way door, I think is very helpful for making smarter decisions over the longer run. So that's what we've been doing. One way we can help create more of a one-way door is looking at kind of contract to hire opportunities where we're very upfront. It can start off as a temporary hire where they're still W-2, but there's a certain time frame on it. And then if our revenue or funding is at the level that's required to pull them on full time, not only have the expectation set earlier, but now we've actually had some more experience with the candidate and have this opportunity to pull them in.
You know, and Justin agrees with me too. I just noticed him chime in on the two-way versus one-way door. I think that's a really important analogy that you or metaphor that you bring up, Brian. I want to get Sierra's take on it because she's been deeply involved in all things talent. And when we're looking at the situation on the ground and even some of the things that Brian referenced, how would you at least offer a different path to those organizations that are trapped in this binge and purge hiring cycle?
I think if we really think about the history of the whole mass layoff epidemic, is what we're going to call it, that goes all the way back to the 19th century through the industrial age. And it's such an antiquated way of hiring, especially with all the technology that we have on our side now. So I think that, today's workers are really wanting the trifecta, what we call the recruiting trifecta. They're looking for good pay, they're looking for good culture and good benefits. And when you talk about mass hiring and the effects that has on a company and its brand, it's killing the culture, which is the one thing that we really have total control of. So Brian talked about it, initially, that contract to hire, that's what the staffing industry was built off of, being able to kind of hold your workers if you can't take them onto your payroll full time or you feel like you need them for a short-term project. But I think we have done a real disservice, especially in the tech industry, with this mass layoff because it sets your company up for failure in the long term, especially when you want to turn around and bring them back, 3, 4, 5 months down the road when the economic turn is better for you guys.
I appreciate you sharing that insight, and especially when you're speaking from the staffing lens, that's a space that I've spent a lot of time in, and I know that Adam has too. But I want to hand this off to Justin and get his perspective on it because you've been in several sort of early and various stage startups, and I'm curious to get your perspective on how you've navigated that situation on the ground that I described early on in the show. How have you seen it done differently, or maybe not, during the course of your various experiences at various organizations, and what's how did that inform how you move forward in your later roles or even in your current role?
It's a good question. So I was a very early employee at a media company that we went from like 29 people when I started to over 600 by the time we sold it to private equity. And then a couple Facebook and Google algorithm changes came in. Business got very much impacted by those. We had to do a pretty big layoff, like just to survive. And it was interesting for me in that like kind of rebuilding and going through the reemergence from that, like the concept of job design got very, very, very important to me. Like if you're going to build a team, make sure you're defining roles and building roles very carefully so that you don't get into this inefficient sort of operating model where then you just overhire to make up for any sort of growth deficit you have going forward. I think that's a lot of what's happening in tech lately is that, people take a bunch of money at crazy valuations and they have to grow into that valuation. So they just throw bodies at the problem. Well, when you do that, you're not necessarily designing roles properly. You're not necessarily thinking about how these teams fit together, and you overhire. And then you end up going through like the worst exercise any leader ever wants to do, which is going through the spreadsheet of like what names, to keep and not. And like, that's something that I don't want anyone to ever have to do. And if you build the roles correctly going into it, you can avoid a lot of that. And I want to just really quick, piggyback on something Sierra said about like the culture and benefits piece. This is something that is really important to me now, and is why big part of the reason why I joined Compt. Like we're on a mission to try to make those benefits more attractive and more useful to therefore create a culture of belonging and acceptance and all these things. And if you've got a great job designed, you've got the right mix of culture, benefits, pay, all these other things, you can hire the best people, which means maybe you don't have to be as inefficient with hiring more, right? So like it all comes back to getting really great people on your team.
Yeah, I really like how you tied that in, Justin, especially with from a hiring philosophy. Are you going to take the we need a butt in the seat mentality, or we just need the best person that can join our organization and advance us philosophy? So there's an important, sort of philosophical grappling that happens there. So I appreciate you bringing that in. Adam, I definitely want your take on it because you bring probably one of the really unique perspectives in my network to this problem. You've been a startup founder that's accelerated in an exit and exited, but you've also spent time in the recruitment space too. So sort of the world that Sierra and I came out of. And I'm curious to see how that informed some of your hiring and organizational development perspectives and philosophies.
Well, Justin beat me to the first comment I was going to make, which was around, we're talking about high growth organizations, right? So most high growth organizations are probably venture capital funded, and they are marching to the beat of that fund's economic demands. And the economic demands are very high growth. And the economic demands of that fund don't think about individuals as human beings. They think about them as commodities in the building blocks of that organization. So, there is you need to, if you're going to go and join a VC backed company, you need to do so with a crash helmet on. And that is something that everybody should know. Everybody that's thinking about going and working in product or tech or sales in a high growth business needs to know that it's not as stable as going and working in a public organization or other more established type of sectors and businesses. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I just want to amplify how much of a problem this is. I run regular lunchtime roundtable gatherings for talent acquisition professionals. They're industry focused, and I ran 5 of them last week. And on every one of them, I asked, what are the things that you want to be doing less of in 2023? Or what are the things that you're nervous about when it comes to 2023? And almost all of them said forecasting demand, understanding how to allocate my resources, understanding what I'm going to be focused on. And many of them worked in very large organizations. This was not just in smaller businesses or high growth organizations. So, I thought it was worth mentioning that because, it really is a big problem, and many people in our world do appreciate that.
Great stuff, Adam. I want to tie in a lot of the things that each of you mentioned and hand it off to Sierra for her perspective on it. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that, Sierra introduced the idea that a lot of these binge and purge cycles are tied into sort of an older model of doing business. And then Adam, you just mentioned sort of the helmet aspect of being in a venture capital backed organization where you are kind of a cog in the wheel, and you should probably expect a certain level of coldness in terms of people strategy in those sort of organizations. I'm paraphrasing and probably taking liberties at some of the things that you've said, but I want to bring that together into talking a little bit, or at least introducing the idea of how a more humane hiring model could be built. And before we dive into the conversation, let's start there. Sierra, when you look at, hey, what is the foundation that this is built on? And then you look at the old ways, the people strategy, how that's been informed in terms of the binge and purge cycle. What's a better way forward? What are some of the things that you've seen well in your experience as a staffing leader that's worked real well that could be broadly applied to a high growth organization?
Well, you kind of said it, just the more humane hiring process and putting the human back in human resources, which is something that we say a lot. So the new model for work is completely different. And I think it was always coming, but COVID kind of catapulted the stress that the talent industry and the talent market is experiencing right now. So the new talent model would be to, number one, offer flexible options as far as how we can better serve multi-generational workforce that we have today. So are we utilizing the older talent that has so much skill set that is exiting at the masses, but we still need that are vital to our culture, vital to our productivity, vital to our bottom line? They have so much knowledge that they can share and spread. So are we offering them flexible opportunities to maybe retire out slowly? Give them some different work models to look at, whether it be remote, part-time, or whatever those cases may be. And then how are we really working with the millennials? The millennials want workforce balance. That's all they were talking about. And they've really taught me more about wanting workforce balance and what that looks like for me. So are we offering those flexible models, especially in the tech world where flexibility should be at the forefront of any position in the tech industry, right? They're the ones that kind of brought remote work to the forefront anyway. So are we giving them these opportunities? Are we giving them opportunities to just be contract workers? I think we try to make this so hard, almost like to the point where we're trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel is already before us, but how can we work within those ramifications to make sure that we're benefiting both sides?
I really like a couple of things that you mentioned, Sierra, especially in the areas of incorporating the entire workforce and also from a workforce demographics perspective, what's important to the entire demographic landscape there. And I want to have Justin chime in a little bit to add to the conversation that you started and maybe offer his own take into some of the things that I mentioned as far as, hey, what's the root cause of the problem?
Yeah, it really is, like, just to call it exactly what it is, irresponsible leadership by CEOs who didn't raise properly and, it sort of set themselves on that hamster wheel. You can be venture backed and have humane hiring practices, right? Like these aren't mutually exclusive events. It just takes a conscious effort by leadership to make that happen. And it's the same, with DEI and bringing in that workforce that has the sense of belonging and, the kind of like comfort that we've been talking about. It can be done. It just takes effort. The last thing you want to do is overhire, put it very bluntly, you don't want to overhire a bunch of people that look like me and then have one viewpoint throughout your entire organization, because then, like, what are you actually accomplishing with that? But I do believe, and I believe this strongly, having talked to a lot of CEOs over the years, that it all starts with them and their approach to how they're building their business. And if they build it responsibly, you can mitigate some of the risk of getting into this sort of churn and burn model. I mean, at the end of the day, like, people leave jobs because of their bosses a lot of times, right? And the big boss at any company is always the CEO, and their behavior and their ethos and how they build their company matriculates down through everybody. So it's probably the most important piece in all of this is just the culture, leadership, how the company's built from the top, and how that cascades throughout the leadership team.
Adam, I think your perspective and Brian, yours too, as both tech founders at various stages of organizational development, is going to be important to advance this conversation. So how did you navigate some of the challenges that Sierra and Justin mentioned and map out a better way? Adam, question to you.
Well, there's a couple of responses to that. The first one is, I do agree with Justin. You can be a venture-backed business and a humane business that hires properly. But I mean, I was thinking, should I say this or should I not? But I'm just going to say it. There is probably a higher than average rate of sociopaths among startup founders. And when we look at some of those type of organizations that go and generate vast amounts of investment on huge valuations, and then, as Justin said, have to go and actually justify that valuation for their next round, they're not necessarily the people that care too much about having to hire 500 people and then let 300 go when the economy changes. We did it a little bit differently at Candidate ID, and I spent a lot of time wasted, but now I know it was wasted, talking to VC firms who were looking for me to be considerably more aggressive about the revenue I was going to generate, the valuation I was going to generate, and the hiring that I was going to generate. And I didn't have the confidence of being able to get to this size within 18 months to be able to justify what they were talking about in terms of the, let's call it, additions to my business plan. And the VC firms who got involved in my organization were ones who were not looking for unicorns necessarily, but they were looking for businesses with a good strong founder team, a realistic an ambitious but realistic business plan. And so I think that, yeah, Justin's absolutely right. On the point around, like, how do you deal with it? I want to cover this later, probably in a little bit more detail, but I firmly believe in the concept of a talent pipeline. And I believe that talent pipeline includes the people who are working for you today, the people who just left your organization, the people who you might want to hire in the future. And you should have an ongoing relationship with all of these groups, no matter what their current status is with your organization, whether you're interviewing them, whether you don't know them yet, whether they've just left you. And it's like an infinity loop. It's an ongoing relationship that lasts right up until the point that they retire. So, I can probably talk about some strategies and tactics for that later on when we get into a bit more details. But I think that is one of the things that is really vital.
Yeah, I think the pipeline concept is going to be something that we explore in detail. So I appreciate you introducing that at this point in the conversation. Brian, I want you to be able to chime in on this situation as well. And I think it might be good for you to bring in some of the unique ways you've kind of taken your business situation as an early stage startup and applied it to your talent strategy that's in keeping with, hey, there's got to be a more humane way to develop an organization. So share a little bit about what you've done as a startup founder in continuing to grow the organization, but with a human-centric point of view.
Yeah, and this is to build on what some of the other presenters have mentioned, right? And Justin was talking about the pressure to throw bodies at the problem and demanding the more growth. And Adam was talking about how we can approach that differently. And a lot of the conversations we're having with partner organizations about our platform are actually along these same lines, where it's a way to relieve that pressure is having more confidence in your talent pipeline, right? If you understand that you have candidates you're excited about, which you don't need to hire right now, and when you're more confident in the need for the role with that specific skill set, knowing that you have those candidates to tap into can really relieve the kind of more frantic idea of let's just get people in the door, even if we're going to have to let go of them quickly. So our partners are now opening up these kind of coffee chats and one-to-ones with candidates, so there's that employer branding, and candidates can resonate and understand what it's like to be there and get excited over time without actually being hired yet. So that way, when there is that higher level of confidence, that the role will be sticky, and this is the skill set that's going to be efficient for tackling the business needs, then that pipeline's there.
So, and I want to stick with you real quick, and I might have missed this part of the answer, but you've done some really unique things in terms of leveraging sort of the gig economy or part-time staff or contractors as part of your go-to-market. So share a little bit about how that's impacted your growth cycle as a startup founder.
Yeah, great question, and I did not touch on that. So basically, as a very early stage startup, we're looking at limited funding. How can we be as efficient tackling our problems as possible? So balancing that growth, one thing we've done is we've interviewed people as to somebody that we'd be excited about hiring full time eventually, but came up with part-time contracts where they're getting some equity portion, so we can manage our cash burn. They're excited about the role. They're excited about getting involved, but they can maintain also the income they're getting from another role. And that way, when our runway or basically our cash flow can support them coming on full time, and we're comfortable about making that decision, we have somebody who's excited, who's already been helping out the organization, getting involved, and has that buy-in. So that's one way that we've been able to really maintain our growth and expansion while not overextending ourselves.
And I really like your approach to it because it points to operating in a way that's transparent. I mean, everybody that is, kind of going through this experience, we're all grown ass adults, and the minimum requirement that we have of most everybody is just be straight with us. So rather than, point sort of this big vision that you might not ever achieve and then hire to the vision, I like the fact that you've been deliberate about being realistic about where you are and saying, hey, this is what we're thinking in terms of our development, and does this work for you? I think that's a great conversation. I want to keep it.
Point,
yeah.
Oh, so I just wanted to add, if there's a position we're looking at in that context, I'm upfront right away, and the credibility that buys with the candidate is amazing. And especially now, some people I talk to have just been through a situation where they were in a role for X amount of months, and the firm is doing layoffs, and they're like, I wish my firm had been this transparent about the level that they could commit.
So I want to keep it right there with you, Brian, and then bring the rest of the panelists in. And I'd like Justin to actually chime in on this. So we're all talking about high growth organizations and how do you build a more humane hiring strategy? And a lot of founders are probably sitting in the audience, or at least will hear this and say, well, that's all kind of fluffy. And that's great and all, but I got stuff to do and I want to figure out my exit. Why could it be damaging to your brand, or how could it be damaging to your brand if you take that cavalier approach to your people strategy? Walk us through a little bit of the long-term implications as a startup founder in a high growth organization if you don't shift the way that you're approaching hiring.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious answer to this is like Glassdoor reviews are a thing, and you can't get the pee out of the pool with those if you've got especially bad ones. So if you have, if you've got a particularly bad riff and it's obvious that that riff is because of, poor management, like that is going to come up. Like that absolutely will come up. And it's one thing for, people to leave an angry review because maybe they feel slighted or, whatever it is, but it's another thing entirely when a mass of people with a consistent message of like, we got driven into an iceberg, that lasts, right? It's interesting in a remote environment where, you don't necessarily have people in the same local community maybe sharing horror stories or something about bad management. Kind of curious to see how that would play out in this particular regard. I know just from being a human being on LinkedIn the past few months, like breaks my heart to see the stories of people, saying, I, need to make my bills are due and I haven't found a job yet. Versus the management screwed us, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know, the local nature of a lot of this has been sort of diffused a little bit, and I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out. But reviews and reputation do follow, and the digital footprint you leave from these bad decisions is a very difficult thing to overcome. So it's best to not put yourself in a position to create that in the first place, right?
Yeah, great insight on the review aspect of it, and I'm sure that Sierra's seen this both from the candidate side and the employer side when you're on the front lines of staffing. Tell us a little bit about how that's shown up in your experience, both in trying to find candidates work for organizations that are struggling to hire, and also how that's impacted an organization when the reviews of poor management or poor hiring decisions hit the wild and hit the review boards.
The talent struggle is real for everyone, but when you start diving into the reviews of some of these companies, it's hard to get talent and the buy-in from potential employees on a company that basically, for lack of a better term, sucks, right? And so we run into that a lot, especially in my field in the manufacturing and light industrial world. That's the first place that employees are going to see your review, just like we're going to their Facebook pages and their LinkedIn profiles to see what kind of reviews that they have or what kind of people they are. They're doing the same with these companies. And when you see review after review of bad pay, horrible culture, I worked there and got laid off immediately. That is all a part of that culture that is costing companies daily. So if your turnover is costing you thousands and millions of dollars for these large firms, your culture is doubling that.
Great stuff there, Sierra. I want to have Adam chime in on this particular aspect in terms of the brand implications of just cavalier hiring. What have you seen? And you've had multiple different views into this in throughout your career. So what have your observations been?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything Sierra said. I think that we're moving towards, in some industries, maybe not in like light industrial and things like that, but in a lot of other industries, we are moving to a global workforce where I think if you're hiring, for example, software engineers and you can hire them anywhere in the world, then it's less damaging because the people don't get together at watering holes and talk about your organization. However, they do get together on GitHub and talk about your organization. So it's in every aspect of culture and leadership. It's really important to consider the impact on your employer brand, and especially if you are hiring in-demand talent who just have got other options and they don't need to work at your organization because they've got skills that lots of employers want. And I'm thinking about software engineers. I'm thinking about nurses. I'm thinking about enterprise salespeople. There's quite a lot of different categories that applies to.
Great stuff. Justin, you just chimed in chat, and I think I'd like you to expand on your comment about culture being a coefficient of where your brand is at. I think that's where you were going with it, but tell us a little bit more about what you meant by that. You're on mute, Justin.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant by that. My marketing brain never shuts off. Culture is a coefficient of everything that your brand puts forward, whether that is from the talent pipeline perspective, it's the way customers feel when they interact with your product, it's the way your ICP feels when they're scrolling through LinkedIn or Twitter or Google or whatever it is, and they interact with your brand. Like the culture you create and facilitate with your employees, like that permeates outside of just the act of creating culture. And that when you nail it, it's another thing that you can have in your recruiting apparatus to say that, hey, this is a great company to work for. I mean, it's not a controversial take to say that great culture attracts great employees, but it's especially important in a world where you've got this huge cohort of people back into the workforce who just might have some sort of hangover from a bad culture experience.
Great stuff. So I want to bring this back to something that Adam introduced earlier on in the conversation, and it's the idea of viewing the talent landscape as a pipeline that fits wherever you are in your organizational development cycle. So Adam, tell us a little bit about what you meant and also how you apply that as a high growth organization when it comes to your talent strategy.
So I want to just introduce a quick concept in advance of answering that question, and that is, in fact, it's a vision. My vision is that employers are likely to get smaller and smaller in terms of fixed term headcount, and they're likely to rely on more contingent support, whether that's freelancers, temps, outsourcing. There's lots of different ways they can do that, and I think that one of the reasons for that is because the complications of this boom and bust type of approach to hiring are unsustainable. And I believe that employers are getting to understand that. So I do predict that in the future, most large organizations are going to have a smaller headcount than they do fixed term headcount. But in terms of a talent pipeline, the first thing is we need to consider, what do we mean by the word pipeline? So if we think about it in the context of sales, a sales pipeline is not, here's everybody I could sell to. A sales pipeline is, who are the people that I could sell to, but I don't know yet? Who are the people that I've got a relationship with, but they're not likely to buy yet? Who are the people that are potentially about to buy? And who are the people that are already customers? So we think about it like that as a pipeline, then apply that to talent. Then we can think about it in terms of who's cold, who's warm, and who's hire ready. That's for like potential candidates. But then going back to what I said earlier, we should also consider the people who are working for our organization today and our alumni. And we should think about it not necessarily in the shape of a pipeline, but more in the shape of what I would term as an infinity loop. So it's a number 8 on its side. And we've got an ongoing relationship with those individuals. So the components of that would be, you need to have all the data for the individuals you might want to hire. You have to have their name, have to have their email address. Ideally, you've got their skills and you know what types of jobs they might be interested in. And then you need a way to communicate with them, whether that's email or it's text message or it's some other way. And what you need to send to them should be relevant to the stage of that infinity loop or that pipeline that they are with you. So if they're clearly not interested in opportunities right now, you're not just sending them job opportunities, because that's going to really switch them off. If they've just left your organization, you're not sending them job opportunities. You're sending them useful, relevant things that are going to help them in their future career to continue that goodwill, that ongoing goodwill with those people, so that in 6 months' time or 12 months' time or 18 months' time, when they are ready to move, they're interested in coming back to you. So that's some of the components of a talent pipeline from my perspective.
Great stuff, Adam. And I'm going to exercise extreme discipline and not soapbox on any of the things that you said, because you threw in sales pipeline, funnel management, nurture campaigns, thought leadership. So there's a lot I could say, but I want Sierra to chime in, because I think you've actually seen this put into practice across your organization and also from a staffing perspective in general. Share with us how that's impacted your ability to grow as an organization, and also how the best clients sort of take that philosophy and the impact that it's had on their organization.
Yes, we are, and kind of tying back into what Adam said, we're constantly branding, right? We brand to our customers, but we also brand to create that talent pipeline. And so he was spot on everything that he said. Your talent pipeline is constantly evolving, and it is from the future worker that you want maybe tomorrow, you may want them next year, to the one that just exited, like he said, that you might want to come back at a later time when you have a different project. We are definitely in that same mindset in a contingent workspace. We are constantly looking for opportunities to bring someone on. So if I interview, or one of our recruiters interviews somebody today for a position, they may not be a good fit for today, or today might not be the right time, or maybe they are happy with their current employer, which still happens every now and then, but not always. So we put them in a pipeline for a later date. So constantly building that pipeline is something that contingent workforce has been doing forever, but I think it's definitely a concept for everyone else to consider as well. But still have that contingent relationship with the contingent provider, so that you have your pipeline built on all ends. And that's what's going to take right now to get through this talent dilemma that we have.
Great stuff, Sierra. Brian, I want you to pick up that ball that Sierra just threw and apply it, or at least talk about how you're actually operationalizing some of that stuff in what you in your talent strategy, because I think that's really relevant for high growth organizations to kind of take some of the key mindsets or philosophies that you're applying to prove out that this is a realistic way to approach your talent strategy. Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Sierra put it perfectly. We're constantly branding. And one way to operationalize that is being very clear, at least as a startup, about your mission and vision and putting that out there. So people can start self-selecting on, is this an organization I might be interested in? Putting ourselves out there for networking opportunities and chats and having these conversations where we're building relationships that can eventually potentially turn into candidate hiring. And it's funny because last week we were having a conversation with a partner, and they were concerned about an employee, that they're opening up conversations. They're concerned about an employee talking negatively about the company. And it's just kind of funny because even if they're not having it on our platform, they're going to be talking to somebody negatively about the company if they're not having a great experience. And it's like Adam mentioned, maybe they're on GitHub in a conversation, right? And so thinking less about how do we stop them from posting on Glassdoor and more about how do they feel positively about our brand, whether they're cold, warm, alumni, et cetera, and keeping that messaging consistent and keeping those relationships in a very positive light, no matter what relation they have to the company.
Good stuff, Brian, and thanks. Justin, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in and add anything to this street line of conversation as far as talent pipelines and how you can build a pragmatic model, or some of the practical applications that you've seen throughout your career being a startup veteran.
Yeah, I think it echoes what Sierra said with it's not just net new people into the pipeline, but it's also, you call them boomerang employees or people that alumni. It's just really vital that you make sure the onboarding, in-flight and off-boarding experience for everybody you bring on board is as cohesive and pleasant as possible, so that those good people come back. Those people that aren't going to come back are at least not going to slow down the incoming pipeline you have. Especially, I think about this all the time with Amazon and the delivery drivers thing, right? I think it was, I read it in Fortune, but a bunch of people talked about it, that report that leaked where they said we are running out of population to hire as drivers and factory workers, knowing that they're just cycling through people so fast, literally running out of human beings to throw at the problem. And if you can mitigate that, scope this down to a more typical issue that companies deal with, build a culture of belonging, build a workplace where people can bring their best selves to work, and that ethos permeates throughout all of the external recruiting you do and any sort of alumni that come back, and you can build a pretty, I think, robust pipeline, or at least help mitigate some of the external forces that hurt that.
Great stuff. So one of the things that I want to transition into, and I'm going to pose this to Adam. So we've kind of talked through what's the issue with how things have typically been handled. What are some alternatives in terms of mindset and operations that we could be doing? Now you're a growing organizations heading into, an economic downturn. What are some things that growing organizations need to consider and start applying now as they navigate sort of this economic downturn, so that they're positioned well when we come out of that downturn? What's your advice in those circumstances?
My advice is that they first of all, they don't cut their relationships with their suppliers, their contingent, agency suppliers. They maintain those relationships. They don't cut their talent acquisition teams. And they have those people focused on two specific things, which they probably haven't done a lot of during the time when they're drinking from the fire hose. And that is pipeline for the future. So have conversations with people who are interested in working at your organization, but you're not ready yet. They might not be ready yet. Bring them into that pipeline and then start keeping in touch with them. So I've done a lot of that over the years. People have approached me about opportunities. It was at least a year before we hired our CFO, from speaking to her joining. It was at least a year from me speaking to the person who became my CTO before we brought him on board. So spend time talking to people that you might hire, who whether you're not ready or they're not ready, it doesn't matter. Start that relationship now. The second thing is, be really focused on the people who work for your organization. Make sure that they're getting all of the learning opportunities that they desire from your business, and they're getting a career inside your organization that they want. Make sure that they've got access to understanding what internal moves there might be for them, because it really breaks my heart when I hear this, that somebody's moving on because it was easier for them to find an opportunity at a competitor organization than it was internally. And it happens all the time. So redeploying your focus from filling jobs to nurturing that talent pipeline and making sure that your internal people are getting the same red carpet experience as that in-demand talent who doesn't currently work for you that you want to hire in the future.
I really like sort of the one of my favorite books is Customer for Life, and it's rooted in this idea that if you want to apply the right mindset to your marketplace, you should be looking at each customer not as a discrete relationship, but as an ongoing relationship over the course of your entire life. And it sounds like, Adam, you're applying that to sort of the candidate strategy or talent strategy aspect of it. So if I'm connecting that, I really like that connection that you just drew out.
Can I just quickly add something to that? Because you're absolutely correct about that. And one of the things that makes me constantly disappointed is when I talk to recruitment marketing teams and employer branding teams, and they're absolutely obsessed with what I would call the point of sale material. That's the career site, and it's the apply process. And I ask them how they're nurturing their internal talent population, and the answer is they're not doing anything. And I'm thinking, they're customers. They are still customers. So customer for life, talent for life, it's the same thing. And so we need to stop being completely obsessed with that point of sale and make sure that we are, nurturing the people right through the life cycle.
Great stuff, Adam. Justin, I want you to take a stab at what are some of the recommendations that you would make, or also, how you've seen, that talent for life mentality come to fruition or be really successful in your previous roles.
Yeah, I would say two things to that. One is, make sure if you use a recruiter or recruiting agency, like really nurture that relationship. These are people constantly plugged into the market. They can always have, what the recruiter we work with, for example, she just knows a ton of people, and she's always talking to these candidates. She's an extension of our brand in a lot of ways. So, treating them with respect and giving them the tools that they can succeed. That's a point of contact with the pipeline that it's important to think about. The other thing I would say too is it's just much like good marketing sells product. Good marketing also helps with your pipeline. So your job listings that you create, make sure managers know how to write good job descriptions. Make sure that when you're looking at a role you're trying to place, like look at other job descriptions for that exact same role. If there's a benefit package you're missing, like look at bringing that in. If there's a certain, if you could up level the ability of that job description to attract people, like run those tests, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, it's exactly what everyone's been saying here. This is just relationship management, and it's relationship management with people who aren't yet employees, people who are currently employees, and people who have been employees. So I don't really have anything profound to add other than the recruiting piece, because I was just thinking about our recruiter as Adam was talking.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things that tie both what Adam said and what you were saying, Justin, together. And it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, Justin, was this idea of having a tightly focused, almost job to be done view of, hey, what's this person going to be doing? And then taking that and applying what Adam mentioned, hey, the person that I'm talking to in my talent pipeline might not be ready for this role, but I need to be in front of them now so that I am ready when they're ready and those things align. So I think there's some value in taking sort of a long view to that strategy component, both from a job design perspective and also a talent pipeline perspective. So don't cut yourself off at the knees yet so quickly, Justin. Brian, I want you to be able to chime in. What are some of the key considerations that you would recommend for growing organizations as they look for better ways to leverage the talent marketplace?
Yeah, and I think this is going to echo a little bit about what a little of what the other panelists have said, but when it comes down to how warm your pipeline is, it's how does your brand resonate? What does your culture mean to that candidate? And what does the idea of being an employee at your company mean to them? And when you look at it, who is going to be better at telling that story or conveying that than your current employees? And that's why it's so important to look at this holistically as not just the people coming in the door, but also the people in the door. And part of the way to do that smartly is also having tying whoever is in charge, having one person in charge of both, right? Or at least a level of collaboration where it's not just a handoff where, okay, I can forget about the people once they're in the door, and understanding that there's this direct incentive to work together and collaborate and make sure that that experience is going to enable additional people to come in because of I think Justin put it, in how it's going in flight is going to affect how that onboarding and offboarding process is. And that's why statistically a candidate with a connection at the firm is 6 times more likely to join a firm. That comes down to having positive experiences being conveyed from the person at the firm and understanding what that looks like and getting people excited about that. And that's how you're going to have a warm, engaged pipeline and set yourself up for success when there is that level of confidence and readiness to hire.
Yeah, and I think what struck me when you just mentioned that, Brian, is that if you want internal evangelists for your organization, what better way to create that out in the marketplace than really focus on developing them as well? You're probably going to save yourself a lot of frontline expense because it's always going to be more expensive to hire from outside your organization and bring talent in for a particular role versus giving people stretch opportunities that are already in your organization. So there's a talent development component that's important as well. So really pragmatic point of view that you shared out there. Sierra, I want you to close out this portion of the conversation and expand on anything that's already been said or add your own take on how organizations can really, if they're a high growth organization, how they can be really more disciplined or effective when it comes to their talent strategy.
Well, I think everybody has been completely spot on. Talent in this whole process is a relationship building. It's almost dating, if you think of it in that aspect. So you're having to woo in the talent that you want for your future pipeline, but you're also still dating in the marriage with the current talent pipeline that you have. So what are you doing to keep the people that you have that are a great culture fit, that are great people in your organization? And are you pipelining them to prosper within your organization? And that's not by giving them the cost of living expense raise every year on their annuals. Are you giving them great opportunities, and with those opportunities does it have true growth, and that's financially and professionally. But then on the new talent side, are you really offering great opportunities, and are you offering sustainability, which is what the whole conversation has been about today? That's what people want. That's what the people are telling us that they want. And it's up to us as companies, CEOs, HR people, and everybody else to be in touch with today's pipeline.
Great stuff. I know that I want to wrap up real quick, and Brian has to hop, so I want to make sure that everybody can get a hold of Brian. Brian, where can people find you, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email, brian@join-odyssey.com. Love to connect and discuss more, and thanks for having me on the panel.
No, great stuff, Brian. Appreciate you sharing your insight. I want to hand off to Sierra. Sierra, really appreciate your insight in this conversation. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you and have more detailed conversation on their talent strategy challenges?
Well, thanks for having me. And yes, I am on LinkedIn all day, every day. So that is probably the best way to get in contact with me. Or you can reach me through Excelsior Staffing.
Great stuff. Adam, same question to you.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn most of the day as well. Easy to find. Just type in Adam Gordon ICIMS, ICIMS, and I'll come up pretty quickly. I connect with everybody who's in talent, recruitment, or interested in the subject.
Great stuff. Thanks again for joining us. Want to, last but certainly not least, the shiniest member of the panel. Justin, where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
I mean, LinkedIn, Justin Schmidt. If you want to hop on a round of Halo with me, JTron 9K on Xbox Live. But kidding aside, compt.io, ultimately this is a conversation about creating cultures that attract the best people. That's benefits, and that's compt.io. So thank you for having us.
And don't miss out on Justin's great content on TikTok. He does some awesome dances out there too. So you might want to follow him there. So I want to thank all of the panelists for joining and advancing this conversation. We appreciate your insights. For those of you who want to get a hold of me, like most of the panelists, I am always on LinkedIn. I have a steady stream of content that's coming out across a number of channels. Easiest way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, but you can find me on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and everything except Instagram, because that's only for food pics. If you have questions or challenges when it comes to any sort of talent issue that you're trying to navigate, or even success stories that you want to share, make sure you reach out to me directly. You can always ping an inquiry at Circa. We help on that front too. So any number of ways that we can help you. But the goal here for us is to help talent leaders move their initiatives forward by empowering them to do more with less by leveraging collective intelligence. This is one example of that. We're looking forward to another great series of shows starting in the new year. Until then, happy holidays. Thanks for joining us, and looking forward to your feedback and comments.